When my own son told me, "Leave the keys on the counter and go away," my hands trembled, not out of fear, but out of something much colder: betrayal. I had raised him in this very house. Every wall, every piece of furniture, carried memories of his childhood. And now he wanted me gone. Like I was some stranger trespassing on his property. I didn't argue. I just stood there staring at him, wondering when my own flesh and blood had turned into someone I barely recognized. 2 weeks earlier, things had been different. I had been struggling financially after retiring early due to health issues. My son Ethan had offered to let me stay in the guest room until things got better. I thought it was kindness, thought it was love. But slowly, I began noticing changes. The way he avoided conversations. The way his wife, Melissa, looked at me like I was a burden. The whispers that stopped when I walked into the room. I pushed it all aside. This was my son. He wouldn't hurt me, right? That morning, I overheard them talking in the kitchen. Melissa's voice was sharp. "She's holding us back, Ethan. We can't remodel with her here. She'll leave soon," he muttered. "I'll make sure of it." And that's when I knew the eviction was coming, not because they needed space, but because they wanted control. Still, I never expected him to do it so coldly. Standing in the living room, he didn't even look me in the eye when he said those words. "Leave the keys and go away." No explanation, no apology, just dismissal. I placed the keys on the counter, my heart pounding. As I walked out, I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror. My face was calm, but inside something had snapped. You see, what my son didn't know was that the bank still recognized me as the legal owner of the house. And if he thought throwing me out was the end of the story, he had no idea what was coming next. Justice must be restored. And you won't believe what I did next. Before we continue, subscribe and tell me in the comments, where are you watching this from? When I got home that night, my head was buzzing, but not from sadness anymore, from calculation. I pulled out my old notebook, the one I used for budgeting back when my husband was alive. My son probably thought I was too old to keep track of numbers, but I remembered every cent. That mortgage payment I'd been covering for him and his wife, $2,350 a month. Been paying it for 3 years straight. That's $84,600 in total. $84,600. And not a word of thanks. My stomach tightened just thinking about it. I wasn't just hurt. I was done being taken for granted. I still had the property papers tucked away in my safe deposit box, the ones with my name printed in bold as the owner. The bank never updated the records because technically, the mortgage was still in my name. My son might have been living there like he owned the place, but legally, it was still mine. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of tea, staring at the keys he wanted me to leave behind. My hand curled into a fist. I wasn't leaving anything behind. Instead, I picked up my phone and called the bank. I kept my voice sweet and calm, the way I used to when tucking my kids into bed. "Hi, I'd like to confirm the mortgage status for my property on Elm Street," I said. "Of course, ma'am," the woman on the other end replied after typing for a moment. "Yes, it's still under your ownership. Monthly payments have been up to date." "Good to know," I said, my heart racing. "I'll be making some changes to the account access, effective immediately." The next morning, I went to the branch in person. I signed a stack of forms that revoked any third-party authorization. My son and his wife would no longer be able to call about the mortgage, make changes, or even access information without my permission. Then came the first strike. I canceled the automatic payment from my account. Just like that. I imagined their morning a week from now, when they'd get the notice from the bank. "I think there's been some kind of mix-up," my son said, his voice tight. "The bank says the mortgage payment didn't go through." "Oh," I said lightly. "That's strange. Maybe because I'm not responsible for it anymore." Wanted me out of the house, remember? There was silence, then a sharp inhale. Mom, you can't just. I can, I said, my tone dropping. And I did. That's when I heard the edge of panic in his voice. He needed me more than he realized, and now the balance had shifted. When Daniel called me that morning, his voice was dripping with arrogance. You know, Mom, he said, pausing for effect. Maybe you should finally accept that this house is mine now. We're just too old to manage things. The words cut deeper than I expected, each syllable laced with the kind of superiority only ignorance could create. He even laughed lightly, as if he was doing me a favor by reminding me of my supposed place. I bit my tongue so hard I could almost taste blood, but I forced myself to sound calm. You're right, I said softly, letting my tone carry a hint of surrender. Maybe I have been holding onto things for too long. Why don't I come over and give you everything you need? His voice lit up instantly, smug and victorious. Finally, now you're making sense. He had no idea that every word I spoke was part of the snare I was tightening around him. A meeting he was so eager for wasn't going to be a handover. It was going to be the first step in dismantling his little fantasy of control. I was going to give him exactly what he asked for, in a way he would never forget. The day of the charity gala arrived, a glittering event in downtown Chicago, filled with the city's elite. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, reflecting the warm golden light over the polished marble floors. Everyone was dressed in their finest, mingling with champagne flutes in. Michael knew the Worthingtons couldn't resist attending. It was the kind of stage they thrived. He had already made sure their names were listed as major sponsors for the evening, a fact they would eagerly boast about. But what they didn't know was that Michael had arranged for the event's media screens and guest speeches to include a special presentation at precisely 8 p.m. At 7:58, the Worthingtons were holding court near the main stage, laughing too loudly there, expensive jewels catching the light. They didn't notice Michael slip away to the event coordinator's table. When the clock struck 8, the music softened, and the host took the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we want to recognize a truly unique example of generosity. And, well, truth. The large LED screens lit up, not with their smiling sponsor photos, but with a slideshow of documents Michael had painstakingly gathered. Bank statements, forged signatures, screenshots of cruel messages they had sent about keeping the help in their place. An email thread detailing how they had cheated multiple small businesses, including Michael's own late father's construction firm. Gasps spread through the crowd like wildfire. Guests leaned in, whispering. The Worthingtons froze, their perfect smiles faltering into tight-lipped horror. Michael stepped forward, his voice calm but razor-sharp. I thought tonight would be the perfect time to show what real generosity looks like. And what greed, deceit, and arrogance look like when the masks come off. A murmur of disapproval rose from the guests. A few even stepped back from the Worthingtons, as though their mere presence was poisonous. Cameras from the local press began clicking. Edward Worthington stammered, This is slander." But Michael merely raised an eyebrow. "These," he gestured toward the screens, "are your own words and numbers. Nothing here is mine, just yours in public view." Silence. Then a slow, deliberate clap came from the far side of the room, followed by another, and another. Soon the applause grew into a wave, but none of it was for the Worthingtons. Was for the man who had just dismantled them without raising his voice. Michael gave a small nod and turned to leave, his parting words slicing through the heavy air. "Enjoy the consequences." As he walked out into the crisp night air, the Worthingtons were left surrounded by whispers, judgment, and flashing cameras, their perfect facade crumbling in real time. When the dust settled after the gala, The fallout hit the Worthingtons harder than anyone could have imagined. Edward lost several key business contracts almost overnight as clients distanced themselves, unwilling to be associated with scandal. Their once prestigious social circle began to dissolve, invitations stopped coming, and whispered rumors followed them everywhere. Melissa's luxury car was repossessed after she missed payments, and the foreclosure notices started piling up on their front door. The mansion they had flaunted like a trophy was now under threat of being seized by the bank. One afternoon, I received a text from Melissa. "We never wanted it to come to this. Please, Ken." We talked, typing back firmly. "You made your choices. This is your mess to clean up." Not long after, Edward called my phone. His voice was low and desperate. "Look, I'm sorry for everything. Can we sit down and work something out?" I paused, weighing his words, but the anger and pain ran too deep. "There's nothing to work. You burned every bridge. Don't call again." They had tried to tear me down, but in the end, it was their own actions that destroyed them. Refused to be their safety net anymore. They had to face the consequences alone. After the storm had passed and the Worthingtons' world crumbled, I finally found peace in the quiet moments I had long forgotten to cherish. Without their constant drama and betrayal clouding my life, I focused on rebuilding myself, emotionally and financially. I sold a small portion of the property I legally owned and used the funds to pay off my medical bills and finally take that long-delayed trip to visit my sister in Seattle. It wasn't about luxury, it was about freedom. Freedom from the toxic ties that once bound me. More importantly, I surrounded myself with people who truly cared. My found family, friends, who showed up not because they wanted something but because they genuinely loved and supported me. There was Clara, my neighbor who brought over home-cooked meals and never asked for anything in return. And James, a kind man from the local community center who helped me volunteer at the shelter every weekend. In their company, I learned what real family meant. Not blood, but trust, respect, and kindness. For the first time in years, I smiled without hesitation. Life had given me a second chance, and I wasn't going to waste it. Even months later, the Worthingtons' downfall showed no signs of stopping. Foreclosure notices still arrived like cold reminders, and their names remained blacklisted in the business community. Rumors of legal troubles and broken relationships kept swirling around them, proof that karma had settled in for the long haul. Meanwhile, I sat peacefully in my cozy living room, a cup of tea warming my hands and the soft hum of rain outside my window. The weight of their betrayal had lifted, replaced by a calm I hadn't known in years. Simple joys like watching the sunset or reading a good book now filled my days with happiness. If you found justice here, please like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Where are you watching from? For another story filled with twists and emotions, click